oh God, like, woe is me, like, kill me, I want to die. And I'll be honest, like, sometimes you feel like that, like at the end of your like 24-hour shift or in the middle of residency, that invitation for that God says, like, you just need to rest and like eat some cake, take a nap.
What's up, alumni? Hey, as we've done a few different times this year, we're chatting with one of our Focus Ministry alumni today. We're joined by Victor Hsiao, an alum from InterVarsity's grad and faculty ministry at USC, where he went for medical school. Victor is an MD who just finished his chief resident year at the University of Washington Seattle Children's Hospital, and he will soon be starting a new role at a faith-based pediatrics clinic in Seattle. Today, Victor's going to share a bit about what it was like transitioning into residency and how his time with his grad fellowship at USC helped prepare him for his unique calling and context with Jesus. Welcome to After 4, your podcast for navigating life after graduation. I'm your host and guide, John Steele, and this one's for you, alumni. Victor, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to get to talk to you here and to hear a little bit about some of your transition experience, to hear some of your places that you've seen God at work in you and in your calling since graduation, and we're doing it in sort of a special way. Victor, over the course of this year, we've been engaging with some of InterVarsity's Focus Ministry alumni, because we know that some of the things that you experience on campus and that you experience after graduation, that they are unique, they're contextualized. And so we want to be able to hear some of those stories and share some of those stories for our other alumni who are in similar places. And so, Victor, let's just start off. My understanding is that you were part of an InterVarsity grad fellowship during med school. And so can you just like paint a picture for us? How did you get involved with the fellowship while you were on campus? What were some of your memories and experiences that you had during that time? Like, just give us a little trip down memory lane here.
Yeah. So I went to USC, University of Southern California, for medical school and was part of our fellowship there. It was called Keck Christian Student Fellowship, or Keck CSF. And when I was looking for community coming into medical school, I knew that faith was a really important part of my life. And so I was looking at our like Christians or the student fair, activities fair, just looking for the booths that were talking about faith. And so that was the main booth that we had at our school for Christian Fellowship. And so got involved, and it was a pretty small group, but I would say it laid a lot of the foundations for how I thought about faith and medicine. And it was this space where I could dialogue with people about, medicine is really hard. Studying in medical school is really hard. And transitioning out of medical school and into residency is pretty challenging as well. And so to be surrounded by classmates and also mentors and faculty who are thinking about or have thought about these questions was really impactful for me. Our fellowship kind of had a couple of different pieces that were built into the weekly calendar. We would meet for Bible study once a week. And when I led the fellowship, we would meet at my apartment and we would just have dinner and then study the Bible afterwards, which was always great. Nice. And then every week, like during the week, at the like noon hour, we would meet as a group and invite like a guest speaker, either like a doctor from the community or from the university, or like hospital chaplains, or just people who are in the medical space to come speak on like, what does it look like to bring your faith into your practice of medicine or into the field of medicine? So I think like we had a lot of different activities throughout the year, but for me, what was really special is just remembering when I first came in, how diverse our fellowship was. I'd grown up in primarily like Asian American or like Chinese American spaces for like church and fellowship. And so when I came to medical school, our fellowship had people from like all racial ethnic backgrounds. And I think one of my favorite parts was getting to study the Bible and talk about the Bible and how faith and medicine intersect, but then having this additional lens of like culture, race, and ethnicity, and how that like painted I think more beautiful, like full spectrum understanding of what the gospel is. And I really loved that. And that was really special for me.
That's really awesome. I love the thought that that as you think about your fellowship, and I think this is one of the baked in beauties of our focus ministries, is that they do such a good job at the get-go from helping you contextualize what you're studying and learning and some of the experiences that you can expect to have with that in the next phase of life, in your professional experience. A couple of the big questions that I have for you that I'm hoping that we can wrestle with together here. And that is some of the uniqueness of your transition experience, and then the unique ways that your grad fellowship, at your Keck CSF fellowship, did help you prepare for some of these experiences that you've had after graduation. So I let's start with that very first one. As you think about your time of transition from, maybe, as you talked about, there's already like sort of multiple legs of that transition that happened for you. So feel free to jump into whichever one is most helpful or feels like it stands out the most to you. But as you think about your experience on campus with CSF, what are some of the things that you see, and not just your time on campus as with CSF, but your time on campus as a grad student, as a med student, and thinking about the time of transition that happened? What are some of the unique experiences that you had being in that world that you can look back on and say, yeah, I'm not sure that every grad has this experience. I think this is sort of unique to my circle. What were some of those things for you?
Yeah. So I think the biggest transition that happens for every medical student as they leave medical school is to start residency. And whether you do a residency that's 3 years or one that's like 7 years, it's all grueling, and very busy.
Wow.
And I think not only is it like you're still in training, but there's also the lifestyle, I think, that comes with residency. I think most residency programs, you're going to be working 80 hours a week for most parts of the year. You flip between days and nights, day and night shifts. You have 24-hour shifts built in different ways into your schedule. And you're also taking care of sick patients with high medical complexity or social complexity. And then my training program, I was part of the University of Washington, Hsiao Children's Alaska track. And so within that, also spent a lot of time moving back and forth between Alaska and Seattle. And so all of those pieces, I think, are challenging in and of themselves. But then it's also, I think, for many people as they transition into that, whether Christian or not, it's hard for people who are not in that or who haven't done that before to necessarily understand. And then with that kind of schedule, it's pretty hard, I would say, to be able to take care of yourself and also develop hobbies or build community. And so I think when we're talking about Christian community or the transition for believers, we talk about the importance of having Christian community. But if you're moving to a new city and you're working 80 hours a week, maybe you're working Sundays or you're post-con Sundays, how do you build community with that? And so I think just even that first piece of how do you build community and then how do you take care of yourself and have healthy rhythms, I think is a huge question that's unique to medicine for graduate students in medicine. And I think having that opportunity for us to begin dialoguing about those questions when we were in medical school was really, really fantastic because you start getting a taste of that in your clinical rotation years, your last 2 years of medical school. I thought that was fantastic. And to be able to dialogue that with upperclassmen and then with doctors who are practicing physicians in the community or residents who are at the local hospital and who come back and speak. And they're like, yeah, this is how I'm figuring it out. And I think that was one thing that I really loved about our fellowship was being able to have those guest speakers who would come in and be able to talk about all of these different questions of just how do you even find any sort of rhythm in this really unique schedule that we have in residency.
Did you find a way to navigate that in a healthy way? Or was it mostly this is a season where I just have to grit my teeth and get through it, and then I will find a healthier rhythm afterwards? As you think about some of your fellow alumni who maybe are just getting ready to step into that, can you give them a leg up as you're thinking about kind of do you have any tricks of the trade as far as being able to connect well with community in that really hectic season of life?
Yeah. I think one thing that I appreciated in my like process of looking at programs was thinking about not only what sort of program would provide me with good medical training, but also like what city or what space would allow me to continue to grow spiritually. And so I think as we're going through our medical training, oftentimes the focus is on like, I want to get the best training so I can be the best doctor. And I think that is true. And at the same time, like when God is preparing a place for us for residency or for our next step in training, he is not only preparing a place for us to grow in our medical knowledge and how to practice medicine from like a science perspective, but also for us to be filled as individuals and to grow. And so I think bringing that to the table too, when like you're praying about how do I want to rank my programs that I want to match, like asking God, like what have you been doing in my life over the course of these past few years? And like what residency program is going to prepare me not only medically, but also in all the other areas of my life that you're calling me to be faithful to. I think once you get there, I can definitely talk more about that. But once you get there, I think it's like finding a church where you're going to be like seen and known and like kind of held accountable, I think, in a gracious way of like, when you're not there, people notice that you're not there. And people like ask you like, hey, I haven't seen you. And I've found that like the people I've appreciated most in like my church community are those who aren't like shaming me for not being at church, but then they're also like lovingly being like, hey, I haven't seen you. How's work been? Have you been scheduled to work? Or sometimes it's like, I wasn't scheduled to work on Sunday, but I was just like exhausted from the week. And I just needed that morning to like sleep a little bit, catch up on sleep so I could be ready to like take care of patients again the next week. And so I think finding community and church where like they're able to support you in that way, to love you and support you, but also like keep you accountable and call you out once in a while when maybe you're missing church a little more than maybe you should be.
It's really interesting as you're talking about that I hear there's a need for a certain level of flexibility. There's a need for a certain level of grace, like for yourself and from the community that you're engaging with. And because I think that so often, especially when we are on campus or even when we're not on campus, when we found a particular rhythm of life, we find that our spiritual disciplines have a particular rhythm themselves. And then when we have a big transition and we move into something new, that oftentimes those rhythms must change with them. And I think sometimes we can feel sort of like, I've got to shoehorn this hour that I used to get, or this whatever particular rhythm or type of engagement with the Lord. Like I've got to do it that way because that shows that I'm dedicated. It shows that I'm consistent. And the more that I experience personally, and the more that I talk to alumni in transition and to other experts in the field, I just hear more and more like you need to hold those things with open hands, and that it's not about figuring out how to maintain the exact same thing. It's figuring out, how do I do something that is good for me, that is healthy, that keeps me close to Jesus and to people, but does it in a way that is actually contextualized and makes sense for the season of life that I'm in right now. And it seems to me like that is very much what you're advocating for in the experience that you've had.
Yeah. And I think that the call is ultimately to be in relationship with Jesus. And that happens on Sundays in church, but that can also happen in the hospital when you're on a 24-hour shift and you don't have a moment to like pause or maybe even eat or go to the bathroom. Like God is still in there in that. And so even thinking about, I think InterVarsity and like many other fellowships have a lot of really great ways that they talk about how can we see God in the places that we are, and how can we walk with the Lord, even when we're not doing it in the like traditional spiritual disciplines of like, reading the Bible, praying, and sitting in service and like listening to worship songs. Like those are all great. And at the same time, I think residency and like medical training just pushes you to see how God is present in everything, in our interactions with our patients as we're sitting in the workroom. Or like just walking in the hallway in between patients. And like, that can also be an opportunity to be with the Lord and be like, God, I'm stressed. I don't know what I'm going to do for this patient, but like, would you meet me here and guide me? And I think some of my sweetest like interactions or like moments with the Lord have come from those moments of like desperation and asking God for help in the hospital.
I know that there's many more avenues that we could search together in there, but I'm going to turn us to my next thing that I want to hear from you. And you've already alluded to a couple of these things, but I'd like to lean into them even further. And that's, as you think back about your time with CSF, how would you say that has, now that you've lived it out a bit more, like how would you say that time helped prepare you for engaging with your calling and your context as you know it today?
Yeah, I would say so many ways. I think there's like a couple of pieces that I think about. There's like a couple of mentors, some that were through CSF, like our IV campus minister, as well as some of our guest speakers that I got to interact with and I got to actually work in clinic with outside of the CSF context. And I think they really shaped how I think about the practice of medicine. And it's fascinating. I think even though I was a medical student, and it's like so early in my training, but it really laid, I think, the foundation, like planted seeds that I think have just like continued to grow over the past few years as I've gone through residency. And I think some of those are like, I worked with this one doctor who every single day when I worked with her in clinic, she would start the day off with a prayer. It was a Christian clinic, and she would pray for the team and pray for the patients for the day. And the first thing that she would start with every day is, "Dear Jesus, thank you that you're God and I am not." And that prayer, it's like so short, so simple. And because I prayed it with her like multiple times over my year with her, I just like learned it. And so even though I may not always remember to pray it, but when I pause and I'm like, God, I'm maybe at a loss of words. I'm so tired in the hospital or in clinic today. But then I just like go back to that memory, or that memory just like comes to mind. And it's such an amazing way to, I think, just center like my practice of medicine. There's like other pieces too. Like I talked about this kind of in our pre-call, but I decided to take a research year in the middle of medical school. And as I was like going through that decision-making process, I was asking couple of different mentors on like, should I take that research year? How's it going to impact residency? And there's like two responses that I got that even though it's like unique to that specific question, in response to that question of like, should I take this research year to go overseas and do missions? The responses I got have actually shaped, I think, a lot of other decisions I've made in the past couple of years. And so I asked them and they said like, the first question that one of my mentors asked me, I like described the situation and she goes, what decision will make you more like Jesus? And I was like, that's so good. Like, wow. At the end of the day, when I was like thinking about it, I was like, how's this going to impact like applying to residency or like my future career, or like, how do I know if like this is God's calling? But like it boiled down, I think, to this like very simple question that I think has allowed me to frame many other decisions I've thought about as I thought about like, where do I want to practice after residency, or like, what do I want to do with my life outside of residency as I'm like making this transition out of residency? And I've found that I've come back to this question time and again. And I think the other like question, or the other like, sorry, not question, statement I think that I've come back to many times is one of my other mentors was like, you do it, you don't do it. Like, I think both of them sound great, but like the most important thing that I want you to remember is that you're loved by God and you're his beloved no matter like what decision you choose. And I think that too has been very grounding. And I think in a world or in a field where so much of like what you do matters, maybe sometimes above like your identity in Christ, I think those pieces have been very, very grounding for me as I've like gone through my practice of medicine. So those are like more like big picture kind of like principles that have really shaped me. And I'm happy to talk more about like theology of like practicing medicine and like kind of the specifics of that. But like,
sure,
as I just think about like, you know, our audience of like graduate students and who are thinking about like, what am I going to do next? Where am I going to head to next? And how do I discern calling? Like, I think those principles are, like I lean on them a lot in medicine, but they're not unique to medicine. Like God is God and we are not. Like that is like the same, like no matter what field you're in.
No
and
matter
like what decision are you going to make to be more like Jesus? And you're loved because of who you are and what Christ has done and not because of like what you do. Like, I think those are such unique truths that like, even when I mentor like people who are not in medicine, like I come back to those truths, but those are ones that like came up for me when I was in medical school and in CSF.
Yeah. That first one in particular of you are God and I am not. I mean, like you said, that's something that any one of us can take and hold on to as an encouragement of like, oh, okay, that it removes a certain amount of weight from your shoulders, really. But I would have to think that there is a special amount of, what's the word that I'm looking for? I mean, there's maybe more skin in the game or a unique level of risk in your profession, you are making decisions or helping patients make decisions for themselves as they like own their own health and wellness.
Yeah.
You're certainly making recommendations as an expert. And I mean, that you're putting a lot on the line to do that. And especially in moments of like emergency or just really significant, like we need to make a call right now. What's the right thing to do? To in those moments say you are God and I am not. That enters a whole new realm as opposed to like, should I take this job or should I take that job? You know, that those are important, but they don't feel quite as big of an emergency as someone's health here in the moment. So I would have to think that is really freeing and also maybe pretty challenging in those moments to really hold tightly onto that and to almost like let go of like, God, I'm going to do my best, but you're God and not me. And so this person's health and wellness is in your hands. And the partnership that the two of you have together, God and my patient, and that I'm invited into that to be a part of it with you. But ultimately it comes down to the partnership that you two have and how this person moved forward. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think so. I would say medicine is a huge privilege, but also a huge responsibility, and sometimes can feel like a burden. And I don't think it necessarily goes away, but some people say like maybe like 5, 10, 15 years out of training, like where you kind of understand things more, the burden maybe is a little bit lighter. But I think especially like when you're in training for sure, and what I hear like these first few years out of training, like the burden can feel very heavy. And so to think of our work as being like ultimately God's and not ours, and that we're getting to be invited into this work that he's already doing, I think brings this amount of peace and hope and like freedom and lightness. I think that sometimes we forget about, even if we are believers, because there can be so much pressure to like make the right decision or do the right thing. And sometimes I think it can be easy to look at the outcomes that our patients have and think about, did we do the right thing? And it is this like constant tension of like, I'm going to study hard and do the best I can, but no, ultimately like that God is in control and this is ultimately in his hands. To also be able to see, I think one of the really amazing things about what the gospel brings into how we can view our patients is that God, when he looks at us, he's caring about us as like whole people. It's not just like our spiritual health or not just our physical health. Like my understanding of the gospel and like when I look at how Jesus did his ministry is like, he cares about us as whole people. Like he cares about the physical ailments and like disease in addition to like emotional health and spiritual health and social needs. And I think as Christians, we're able to bring that lens into our practice of medicine, that we get to like see people as whole people and to see them with the dignity of God, that like God has created them with, and that they are created in the image of Him. And especially, I think when I was working with patients in juvenile detention or in our prison system or in like homeless patients who would come in, I think some of those patients sometimes were really challenging to interact with, or some of our patients who maybe don't have any of those pieces, but they're just like really hard to interact with for other reasons. And to still bring that level of like compassion and love, knowing that like maybe I can identify it's because of this reason, or maybe I have no idea why we are having this sort of like uncomfortable interaction between us, but I can still seek to like bring like Christ's love and compassion to this interaction. And when I don't have enough, like I can ultimately go back to the Lord to ask for more and to ask for help, because He is the ultimate source of all of that.
Yeah. And I mean, the word that comes to mind for me as you're talking is the word shalom, of like completeness and wholeness. And it sounds like as people in the world of medicine that you get to be like agents of the Lord's shalom in that community. And like you said, not just considering what does it look like to get this person, for them to get well as far as their physical health goes or their mental health goes. Like, yes, those things, but also like their spiritual health, their relational health, their communal health. Like, what does it look like to think of them holistically? Which takes me back to a question that I really meant to ask you before, but I think it jumps in. I think it works right here really well. Also, being somebody who thinks about health and wellness and medicine as a holistic experience, knowing that you spend so much of your time in a place that really, like, it seems to me puts you in a potentially unhealthy place personally. Like you're talking about these 24-hour shifts and like, you know, swinging back and forth from like days to nights, and you know, like shift work is like that's a dangerous thing. Our bodies are not made to function that way. And my guess is that you've probably even interacted with like shift workers or something, been like, man, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's your job that is really hampering your wellness and your health. And it's like, meanwhile, that is the person who's giving that advice. That is the thing that's like built into your job. How do you take those things that you've learned, the training that you received and the things that you learned on campus, how do you take those and apply them well to your own holistic health and well-being when you're in a context that doesn't always provide that for you, and even like demands that you do the opposite? And maybe you wouldn't describe it that way. From an outsider, that's the way, that's how I'm processing some of these things. But like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think ultimately it's probably changing the system.
Okay.
But until the system of residency changes, I think I often come back to that the Lord like knows who we are and like where we're at. And I think like recently I've just been like reading the like story of Elijah again and the story of Moses. And Elijah, like he goes through this like really challenging and difficult period. And then he like he's like trying to run away, and then he like takes a nap, and then he's like, oh God, like, woe is me, like kill me. I want to die. And and I think like, I'll be honest, like sometimes you feel like that, like at the end of your like 24-hour shift or in the middle of your middle of residency. And I think like that invitation that God says, like, you just need to rest and like eat some cake and take a nap, essentially. And I think that is, for me, like such an important reminder. I think in the field of medicine, there's often this like temptation or like discussion of like, there's always more to do. There's like always more that you need to do to like get ahead in the field or to be ready to apply to fellowship after residency. Or like, there's also this very real, I think, challenge of I spend no time with any of my friends outside of residency or no time with my family outside of residency. And it's really lonely, really hard, and it's really isolating. And no one seems to understand like what I'm going through. And I think when God's like calling Elijah to rest, or like when I like read that story and think about how it applies to myself when I was in training, it's like, not only is he calling us to physical rest, like you need to sleep after your like shifts and like not do more work, but also like rest knowing that God is going to take care of all of those things. Like that God is going to take care of your relationships too. Like even if you can't spend like X number of hours that you would like to spend with your family or your friends, that like trusting in the Lord that he knows that, and that he will also like work in those relationships. And like how and what that looks like I don't know. And I'm going to be honest, like when I was in residency too, like there are moments I'm like, I trust, but God, like, can you work like a little faster and like building some of these relationships, or like allowing me to like show up to like family dinner a little bit less tired. But I have also seen these like amazing moments when I'm like, God, I am like on my last like 5% of battery and I'm coming to family dinner and I'm really tired, but I also very much want to connect with like my family. And would you just like facilitate this conversation in a way for us to be able to connect while also like not having to have me like do a whole lot, because I don't really have a lot to give. And I think those are those moments when like you see how God is not just like calling you into a field of medicine to like do hard things so that you can eventually like serve him as a doctor. Like he sees you in that training process, and that he is like also working, and that you can rest in that. And I think I alluded to Moses earlier too, but I think of like when Moses is like getting ready to go back to Egypt, he's like, who's going to go with me and how am I going to do this? And then God just says, my presence will go with you and I will also give you rest. And I'm just like, can you like give me more here? But I think that God is also like giving us that same promise as we're in these times of like unwell seasons, that he also promises that he will be with us, that he is like Emmanuel, and that he will provide rest. And I think that's not just physical rest, but also we can rest knowing that God is still in control of all those aspects. And so I'd love to say like I have a prescription for like how you can find wellness in residency. But I think it really comes back to like bringing all of it to the Lord and then seeing what he says in that. And sometimes it's like, not, we got to come up with a better plan, or we got to like optimize our time planning in this way, or like I tell people like set expectations with your like family and friends before you go into an ICU month, because it's going to be busy. Like yes, like maybe still do that too, but also like I think bringing it to the Lord and seeing like how he leads in that. And I think those are those times when you like go through that week or that month and you're like, wow, I had all these hopes, and then I brought them to the Lord, and he either redirected them or he's like, I see them. And then he worked it out in a way that I could not have imagined. And to be able to like, I think finish like a season and to be like, this was ultimately like God who like worked through this time and I got to grow in my relationship with him. I think those are such sweet moments. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Maybe more meta, but I'm like, everyone's experience is so different, and I don't think there's a way that I can just like prescribe it, because I think ultimately our relationship with the Lord is so deeply personal as well.
Yeah, Victor, thank you so much for sharing these things with us. Do you have? I mean, you said like there's an encouragement, but do you have a final piece of advice or a tip or a trick that you would impart to someone who maybe is about to step into a residency experience or something similar?
I think don't miss out on what God is doing here and now in your current stage of training. I think there's often a focus on like, when you're in like undergrad, you're like, I just need to get to medical school. And then when I'm in medical school, I'm so ready to be a doctor and to be in residency. And then residency, you're like, I'm just waiting to get to the next thing, fellowship, or like to be done with residency. But I think God is doing so much here and now in your life, in the lives of those around you. And don't miss out on that as you're looking towards the future, like planning for the future, healthy, good. But yeah, keep your eyes open and your heart open to like what the Lord is doing here. And
to all of our alumni who are navigating med school and residency, I hope our conversation with Victor is an encouragement to you. God is God, and He holds the weight and ultimate outcomes of the incredibly important work that you do. And no matter what kind of day, week, month, or broader experience you're having right now as you navigate this season, know that you are deeply loved and cared for. Give yourself grace, rest when you can, and keep your eyes open for God's goodness in unexpected places. Huge thanks to Victor for joining us this week. Next week, come back for the first of 2 brief but interesting episodes that we're trying out as we look at some of this summer's new movies and music and chat about how we're being shaped by the things that we watch and listen to after graduation. We're hanging out with some alumni who are experts in the areas of film and music, and it's going to be a really enlightening couple of conversations, I think. Until then, consider sharing this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and I will see you in the after, alumni. Thanks for listening to After 4. This podcast is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Centera, edited by Caleb Leppert, and our After 4 theme music was written and performed by John Steele.